And today we're going to continue our message series on the stories that Jesus told. And again, this is all about parables that Jesus used to share a story and to help people understand. In a lot of ways, like there's all these stories that have been made up over history and no one ever questions. But Jesus, when he tells you it's a story, it's with a purpose. And so one of the famous historical things was about George Washington cutting down a cherry tree. Like, totally not a real story, but why is it told? Why is this story told? As if it's more of a factual thing. But it's a cool story. It's a neat story. But it was a story that helped kids to learn what? Not to lie. Like, using a historical figure. So Jesus kind of did a similar thing, but we told these stories. He pointed it to a real thing. He told them, hey, this is a story. This is something that's not real. But the significance is in the story on how to understand the gospel. Like we talked about last week, the Pharisees, he told them, he said, I speak in parables so that those who are not with me every day like you can understand and see the gospel, can see the kingdom of heaven. And so today we're going to get started. But before I get started, I'm a little update on Jordan. She just got baptized yesterday, so she's official. She got baptized in the Jordan River. It was kind of a cool moment. It's a wonderful place to be, walking where Jesus walked, getting in water that Jesus was in, where Jesus was baptized. Those are some of the cool things about being in Jerusalem right now. So she spent the first part of her journey in Egypt, seeing historical sites, seeing where Jesus spent his days early on in his life when they exiled out of Israel into Egypt. And she's been able to see a lot of the birthplaces of Jesus. She's preaching today, actually, at the Mary Magdalene's house, which is kind of a cool moment. Some of my favorite memories from there is actually going to Caiaphas' house. He's the high priest. So Caiaphas' house is where Jesus would have spent his last night in the cave. And they have it all dug out to where you can walk down and see where he would have spent his last night. So it's such a really cool place to be. So she's going to come back. She's going to be here with us next week. So everybody says, yay! You know, everybody's excited. She's not with us this week. Oh, everybody's sad. I know. Me too. Jordan's my favorite. But anyway, so just a little update from her. She misses you guys. She texted me this morning. They'll have bedtime around 2 to 3 here today. I don't know what the time change, what it is going to be, because it's been around 3 o'clock here. They've been going to bed. So we'll see. But she's enjoying it. She's ready to be home, though. She misses all y'all. She doesn't miss me at all. She hasn't said anything about I miss you, but she's like, I miss the kids. I miss the church. It's cool, babe. It's no big deal. But before I just wanted to give you those things. But anybody else here, you've lost things in your life? Today we're going to talk about the story that Jesus told about lost things. But I'm the kind of guy that I hate losing things. Losing things can often be the worst, depending on what it is. I remember Emery, my daughter, so she would always lose things. And she's still kind of that way now. She will lose things. But when she was younger, it was because she couldn't see. And I remember the worst feeling in the world. She would go to her room and she'd be like, Dad, I just can't find my doll. She had a teddy bear. She's like, I can't find my teddy bear. I can't find it anywhere. And she had a name for it. I don't even remember what it was. But it was like, I can't find it. And I'm literally walking up. It's like literally laying on her bed. And I'm like, okay, Emery, this is starting to worry me a little bit. And so one day we were at pre-K. We pick her up from pre-K and she's all, excited. And the director comes out, who's a friend of ours. And she was like, hey, I just need to tell you something. She failed her eye exam. I was like, okay, that's no big deal. I mean, it happened, so let's go get her checked. And so we go get my daughter's eyes checked, and they're like, ooh, her vision is, like, really bad. And I'm like, how bad are we talking? Like, she going to need surgery bad? Like, no, but her vision are like 500 over something. It was some weird number. It was really, really bad. And I was like, okay, I need doc. I don't have glasses. I got 20/15 vision. I don't know why. It's great. But Jordan's got glasses, so she understood what she was saying. And I'm like, Doc, I need you to explain this to me. And he was like, okay, so you know how like when you're driving down the road and you can look out and see trees? Yeah, she can't. What does she see? Blurs. It's just blurred. It's color. She can see color, but that's all it is. It's a just giant blob of green when you drive down the road. And so I realized that there was a lot of times she was losing things. She just couldn't see it. And I felt horrible as a dad because you always feel like, oh, I mean, she's 3. It's not like we were like waiting until she was like 12. Like, oh, she just got her contacts in. It wasn't like that, but it was like that whole thing of like, oh man, she couldn't see. I feel so bad because she's going to be opened up to a whole new world and she can see. And it was really cool. So there was all these times when we'd get on to her for not cleaning her room, and she literally couldn't see it. And we'd go up there and like, baby, you need to clean this mess up. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, that's so sad. And so like right after we order her glasses, and it's going to take a couple weeks to come in, and so we're excited, but we're like, hey, go clean your room. And so I go up there and I'm like, hey, baby, you got to clean your. You know what, baby? You take a break on this one. This was Daddy's fault, all right? I'm going to clean your room. And still to this day, though, she can see now. She still has trouble cleaning her room. But this past few weeks, though, she's lost her ID twice, her school ID. And it's always a panic in the morning, like, we got to find my ID. If I don't have it, I have to get a temporary ID. And oh, my goodness. And she talks this fast. She's like, whoosh. And so she's like all panicked. I'm like, babe, it's $5. Okay, I can, if you're doing this every week, we're going to have to work on a payment plan or something, but we're going to get you a job, But if it's just every now and then you lose your ID, it's not that big a deal. It's going to happen. Braylon lost way more IDs than you did. Like, it's fine. You're going to live. But she's like, panics when she loses things. And I think losing car keys is probably the worst, honestly. There's been one occasion where I had to walk my kids to school because it was like, I can't find them. And they were in my like shorts that were in the dirty clothes, and I was like, why did Jordan put those there? I don't know. But just, losing the car keys I think is the worst because it's like you feel like you have to go and find and get, and it feels like it's just going to make you late. One time, yeah, and I don't even have bad eyesight, and I just lose things. It just happens. But in Luke chapter 15, we hear this story that Jesus talks about. Now, a little backstory on this. As Jesus begins to do all these things, he's healing people on the Sabbath. He's doing all these things and making the Pharisees a little upset. And so now we're going to read this entire chapter, but we're going to break it into 3 sections about the 3 lost things that Jesus talked about. And the first one is the story of the lost sheep. And it says this in verse 1, the tax collectors and the other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people and even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go and search for that one until he finds it? And if he found it, in great joy, carry it home on his shoulders. And when he arrives, he will call together all his friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, because I found my lost sheep. In the same way, there is more rejoicing in heaven, more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God over 99 others who were righteous and have strayed away. This story is such a powerful story. And oftentimes when we read the parables, we read it through our lens. Like, how many of you have sheep? Ain't nobody got no sheep. Some of y'all wearing some wool in here, and y'all ain't got no sheep. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's a concept to having sheep that we just don't understand and we don't get. You know what I'm saying? Like, we live in a different world. We live in a consumer world, not a bartering system. But in their day, sheep were a very high commodity. This story was relevant to that first century church in such a way, because the Pharisees are there trying to get Jesus to say something or do something that they can bring him up on charges. They're trying to catch him in these acts, and they're mad at him because he's doing all these things, and he brings it into a real conversation. You see, sheep were a high commodity. That was how most of their garments were made. Sheep farming is probably the highest industry at that time in the first century church. Here in Texas, it's cows, baby, because we eat steak. They don't eat that over there. It's weird. They had a high value in the sheep. Even the Pharisees viewed the sheep with high regards, because they would often take and receive the best of the sheep of every flock. Every year, the best sheep was the one saved for the Pharisees, for the religious leaders to take and sacrifice. It was part of their ritual. And even though that sheep was missing and only consisted of 1% of that population, of that herd, of that flock of sheep, it still had high value. It still had high value, and when it returns, there was much rejoicing because it had value. And then the cool part of this whole thing is that sheep, while it's lost, still has value. That missing sheep still has a value attached to it. It's not like while it's missing, it no longer has any value, that it's no longer has any worth to the shepherd over them. In this particular story, though, the sheep represents those things that have gotten lost by wandering off. One of the coolest inventions ever made, we didn't ever have one for our kids. I don't think. We probably did. was when we saw those little like backpacks that had like the handle on it, like the dog leash is what I call it. And like they would attach it to the kids at the zoo. You know, act like y'all didn't do this. And you just like wham and like pull them back. It's great. Like it's great. Boom, boom. And I wish they would make them like dog ones where it's got like the button, so where they can take off running, and then I can just press the button and it's like, whoo, like, sorry, Lord Jesus, I apologize for that right there. That would be so funny. But this first story of the sheep it's probably the idea of sheep, what they are. Sheep are some of the dumbest animals on the planet, okay? So what happens is they know they're supposed to be at the flock because everybody stays together, but there's every now and then a sheep will see something or food or something, or food probably, and leave and go. Because if it was me, it'd be food. But there's something that catches that sheep's attention that draws it away from the flock. And before it knows, it turns around to see where everybody's at, and everybody's gone, and it's like, oh, no, where's everybody? It's like when you're at Walmart as a kid. Mom's like, go play in the toy section, and you're like, oh, where's Mom? You go looking for Mom, and you can't find Mom. You feel lost. And then you leave, and then she comes to the toy section, and you're not there, and now you're really lost. And that's what's going on here. I know where I should be, but I've strayed away and I've lost my way. I know I belong with the flock. I know I belong with the other sheep, but for whatever reason, I've found myself wandering away, and now I'm lost. The lost sheep of great value, even while it was missing, and it didn't only have value to it as it was part of the flock. Yet as valuable as that sheep was by itself, it did not belong by itself. As valuable as the sheep was, it belonged with the flock. It didn't belong separate. Even though its value never changed, it belonged with the family. And that's why we're such a big component of calling this place family, is because family means different things to a sheep than it does to me, right? It means something different because my context of how I grew up. But we want you to understand this is a family-friendly environment, a family-friendly church, because we value and know that we belong as part of the family, the body of Christ. And the next story is this, the story of the lost coin. You see, you have value even if you find yourself lost. And this next story is that same type of story, but in a different context. And again, he's still speaking to the people that have gathered around to hear him teach, which is a bunch of tax collectors, sinners, religious leaders, and other people in the community are all here, hearing him say this. And he says, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, will she not call her friends and her neighbors and say, rejoice with me, because I found my lost coin? In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels, even when one sinner repents. Yet again, Jesus speaks to the Pharisees as well in this one. One of their biggest things was money. One of their biggest things at that time was money. It was always talked about who gets taxes, who should give taxes. It was such a big thing, and they would even change their censusing to create more taxes. It was a big thing for Pharisees to, money was a part of what they did, of their income, so money meant something to them. And money is always one of those things that means something, but it means something different to my sons and my daughter than it does to me and my wife. There's so many times they'll say, hey, Dad, can I have this? How much is it? It's only like $100. Only like 100. Like what? Slow down. Okay. Only like. You got that laying around? I mean, come on. Is that like normal? Like normally have that? There's been times, oh, it's only like $50. You need me to give it to you like today, or can I like save up for it? I mean, like there's thoughts that I have as a parent that my kids don't often understand. And it's a part of that thing. So when I was a young kid, and this is back in it was in the 1900s. It was in the 80s. I was a toddler, maybe about 3 years old at the time, and running around the house. And my dad had given my mom a $100 bill for groceries for like the month, right? Because that's back in the day, $100 went a long way. Not today, not today. That's a box of coffee and a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs. That's about it. Half a dozen eggs. But so back in the day, though, that was like a serious amount for groceries. And again, I'm a toddler, okay? I don't know the value of money. I don't even know what money really is. And my dad was talking to his brother. They was over at the house. They were working on something. And they see me running around the house. And then they've noticed that I am now holding something green. They don't exactly know what it is. And a few moments later, as they're still working on something at the house, he hears the toilet flush. And he calls out to my mom, "Hey, babe, where's that $100? I put it on that speaker." They had this little speaker that was like in the living room next to the TV. And that's where that $100 was. Apparently, I, in my wisdom, thought I was in that age where you're like trying to flush everything down the toilet. Oh, this looks like it'll go. And it did. It was so funny. Oddly enough, I didn't get in that much trouble because I'm a young kid that doesn't know any better. But anyway, that $100 means something, right? So when we talk about missing money, that's something, right? And I don't care if it's $5. I'm finding it. Like, let's look. Let's get to it. What I always like is when I have like money in a jacket, because we wear jackets like once every 7 years here. And then I like put my hand in my pocket like years later. I'm like, oh, there's money in there. I didn't even know it was missing. Bonus. Go ahead and supersize my meal, please. Thank you. But when I was a toddler, you didn't know the value of that money. But these people understood that value of that coin. That coin meant something. Have you ever lost your credit card? Talk about panic. Like, is someone running this bill up? Like, I don't know what's going on. Did I loan it to somebody? I'm like, occasionally on our business card, I'll get like an alert, like, did you spend money today here? And it's usually like if we're like, there's a certain part of Houston, I don't know where it is, but it's over like by Bel Air, that if we, like, I've rented a U-Haul, and it was like, it flagged our card, and I was like, why'd you flag our card? Well, you rented a U-Haul. Okay. Call me if you think that's weird. I was like, anyway, moving on. But like losing that card is always such a pain because then you have to get a new one, you have to cancel the old one, you have to wait. And well, nowadays the cool part is if you go to your bank, they can oftentimes print you a new one like right there. And it's kind of cool. But it's like, man, that is such a pain when you lose something like that. When you lose a money or your credit card or your debit card. I'd say checkbook, but sometimes when you run out of checks and you need one, that's the worst. But again, this lady here had other coins. This person who had lost these coins had 10 and lost 1. So she's still up 90%. She's still in a good place. It's not like this is breaking the bank, but she still saw the value in that 10th coin. And just because that coin was lost didn't make it worthless. Just because that coin was missing didn't mean it did not have worth. The lost coin is this one thing that is lost because of circumstance. A sheep will wander off, right? We talked about that. But a coin can't get lost on its own. And the reality of the coin is not just going to you know what, I'm going to go to that couch right over there. It looks like a good place to hide. My mom would say things she's from Arkansas, so again, I don't know if anybody here from Arkansas, just before I embarrass myself? Okay, good. We can talk about Arkansas then. Okay. Woo! Well, my mom grew up in the backwoods of Arkansas, and she is an amazing woman. Her family did. Her dad's pastor, so they lived in Jacksonville outside of Little Rock for the longest time. But again, she grew up in the country. We lived in the country as a family. So she grew up with a different lingo that I never understood until I heard Jeff Foxworthy talk about different words that rednecks use, and I started going, I've heard some of these. But one of the things that she would say all the time, she would say, I never. And that was a complete sentence. Like, that was it. And you had to kind of fill in the blanks after that. Like, the context clues were like, okay. Like, when we would do something, my mom would look at us and she'd go, I never. And stop. And I'm like, never what, Mom? Like, it would always be like, it was like when she was mad, though. It was like she didn't know what to say. I never. And we were in trouble at that point. She used a word that my great-grandmother used all the time. It was like one of her favorite words. She'd say "youans." And I never understood that word at all. But it's like, "Youans, get over here." Like, instead of y'all, it was "youans." And I'm like, I don't know why Arkansas makes these weird words, but they do. Like, "Youans, get over here." "Youans, get in here right now." Like, my great-grandmother said it. My mom said it all the time. Because, again, we lived out in the country, so me and my brother would be out in the barn, like, playing basketball. And so instead of, like, pre-cell phone, remember? We didn't, grow up with those things. So she'd either have to physically walk out there or just scream at us from the house. And she'd rather scream at us. And you'd be, "Youans, you get in here now." Okay, Mom, we're coming. After we finish this game. No, right now, Ewans. Anyway, it was Ewans. I don't get it. But it was a phrase that she always said that it was always like, okay, I know this makes a little sense, but Not always the context. When we were looking through things for the house, we're trying to find things. She would say some of the things like, where's the last place you put it? Well, Mom, if I knew that, I would know where this thing is. Okay, if I knew that, Mom. And so one of the things that she would always say is this: well, it didn't grow legs, and it didn't get up and walk out on its own. And I'm like, okay, Mom, that's obvious here. I mean, I'm not assuming that this thing that I lost is disappeared. But that's the same thing with this coin. Is this coin? It didn't get lost on its own. It wasn't like it was like, I'm going to decide to hide. I'm going to go hide. I'm going to be dropped in the seat of the car and hide for years and centuries until you sell this thing and get it detailed and you find me. This coin got lost by circumstance, not by its own choosing. This coin didn't even know it was lost. Yet the owner knows it's lost and is searching high and low until they find this coin. And when they did, they called their friends and they told them all the good news. And the point of this whole story, of this particular story that Jesus tells, is that we matter to him, that you matter to Jesus, even if you don't know that you're lost, and even if you don't see yourself as valuable, he does. He sees you as that valuable coin. And I know we've all cleaned out our cars and our couches and found change. And sometimes it just happens. It gets lost. And circumstances can happen to any of us. Pain, suffering, circumstance, things that happen in our lives on a daily basis. Or maybe it's that once a year thing that just rocked our world, that changed us. It could be that COVID thing. COVID caused so many problems. But it's like one of those things, like COVID, it wasn't something that everybody was like searching for. And it was like, oh, this is so happy this is happening. It was one of those things that just affected everybody. It shut the world down. And it was painful. It was hard. That was circumstance. That had nothing to do with us choosing it. It had nothing else with us saying, you know what, we're going to do this thing because it's going to be fun. It was just something that happened to our lives. And sometimes we can find ourselves lost. We didn't even know we were missing. And it's circumstance that led us to that. It's difficult. It's pain. It's hurt. It's past. And those things can weigh on us. But you matter to Jesus even if you don't see your value, even if you don't know that you're lost. The third story is this that Jesus told. He said that he told the story of the lost son. This is the longest part of the three stories, but he expands on it a little bit, and it goes even further because of his audience, because he knows who he's talking to. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told this story. A man who had two sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of my estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth in between his sons. A few days later, the younger son packed all of his belongings, moved to the distant land, and there he wasted all of his money on wild living. About the time that his money ran out, a great famine swept across the land and began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, now that's a big piece right there I want you to understand. There's that moment sometimes we have to come to our senses and realize where we're at. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even my hired servants have enough food to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. I will go home, I will go to my father, and I will say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him coming, filled with love and compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. And his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both you and heaven, and I no longer am worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring my finest robe from the house and put it on him. Get a ring and put it on his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf that we have been fattening up, ready for a feast. And now we may celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead, and now he's returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So let the party begin. And I'd love to say that's where the story ends. But in verse 25 it says, meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. He returned home and heard the music and dancing in the house, and he had asked one of his servants, what is going on? Your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf, and we are celebrating because of his safe return. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in, and his father came out and begged him. But he replied, all these years I've slaved for you, and I've never once refused to do a single thing you've asked of me. And in all that time, you never gave me one of your young goats for a feast for my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. And his father said to him, look, son, you have stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We have to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. I think the story of the lost son brings a whole new piece to this, because that's almost like not only everybody even in that story, in that first century context, again, we may not understand what it's like to lose a sheep. In our first century context, they did. We understand the loss of money because that was something that they would understand. But everybody understands the loss of a son, like when they go missing. There was one time at the Galleria, which is a mall here in Houston. I don't know why I had to explain that. Anyway, we were at the Galleria for, I believe it was district council. It was district council, and Braylon was probably about 3 or 4 years old, maybe a little older. Landon wasn't here yet, so it was a little 3 or 4. And he's with me, and he's a good kid for the most part. He's a good kid. And so Jordan was like, hey, I need you to watch him. Like when mom gives you that thing, you better watch him or else. And so I'm like holding his hand because he's a sneaky kid, and he's very quick. And so I'm holding his hand, and I literally had to like reach down and pick something off the floor. I reach down, pick it up, stand up, and I turn around, and he's gone. And Jordan is in panic mode. Jordan is like darts out the doors of the convention center into the Galleria, looking for him, screaming his name. And I'm like, I'm going to die. Like, she's going to kill me right here, right now. I'm not even calling the cops. I'm just going to let it happen because it's torturous if they saved me from her, because she'll find me later and then I'll really be tortured. She'll kill me in heat of passion right now and it'll be over. But I'm like, I swear to you, he was right here. I literally went down, picked something up off the floor, put it back on the table, and he was gone. And so we're screaming his name, and finally, this joker comes crawling out from under the table. When he had saw me gone down, he wanted to play a game of hide and seek and went right under the table next to us and just hid there. And I'm like, boy, you are this close to having me dead right now. That was such a real moment, but it was such a thing because you never want to lose your child. You never want to have that in your life. And it's hard enough to go through the difficulties of life without loss. But this was a story that related because they all understood it. But this went much further to give two perspectives. First, you have the father. And I could never imagine being the father who had had these two sons, and he decided to give his inheritance to one of his sons, and he took that son took it and squandered it. And when it says squander it, what it really means is brought disgrace too, because even still, this kid was still known who his father was. Everybody knew whose kid this was. And so as he's squandering the wealth, as he's destroying the family name, the dad is hearing these stories about what his son is doing. His dad knows. It's talked about in the town. We grew up in a small town, okay? Like, I grew up in a small town too. We live in a small town. It's one of those that everybody knows what's going on. Deer Park's getting to a place that's a little bit big, so it's kind of hard to know everything. But where I grew up, 12,000 people, my high school, each grade level had about 250 people in it. I knew every one of them, all right? I could tell you the stories. I knew the stories of what happened every weekend. So this dad is listening to the stories of what his son is doing. And it's breaking his heart. But the cool thing about this story is his dad was always on the porch waiting for him. That maybe one day my son will come home. Maybe one day my son will come home. The other person in this story of this two perspectives was the son who ran when he realized that he was lost. That he realized how far away he had gone, how far away he had run away from his father. There's theories on why this son ran. There's theories on why this son took and ran. The most agreed upon theological point was that he did not want his father's life. That the life and occupation that dad had did not resonate with him in his young mind, and decided to do his own thing, to go out and to live his own life. And as we all know, money doesn't last forever. And woke up one day looking at pig's food going, that looks tasty. And formulated a plan to say, you know what, maybe my dad will accept me as his servant. And the really cool part of that story is the dad had the robe ready and the ring ready. The ring is significant because that was a symbol of his heirship. It wasn't just a ring that was random. It had the family crest on it. So it meant it restored him back to his rightful place as an heir to the throne. And even the son couldn't even get through his entire thing of let me work for you. He just got through I'm so sorry that I've done all these things. And the dad says, come, let's party. Let's celebrate this win. And that's the beauty is it doesn't matter how far you've run or how disgraced you think you may be. The Father's always been there going, now is your time. I've been waiting for this day. I've been waiting for this moment. You may have found yourself at the bottom, but He is the one that is ready for you. The moment you can come to your senses, the moment you turn, the Bible says that He didn't wait for him on the porch, that the Father, once He saw His Son, ran to him and embraced him without hesitation. Probably still smelled like pig's feet. And they don't smell great. If you've ever been to a pig farm, it's not awesome. Not awesome. Squandered everything, destroyed the family's reputation. And the Father, without hesitation, with open arms, ran to him and embraced him and started a celebration. I can't imagine being that father every day going, is this the day He's coming? Is this the day my son returns? But on that day, he was ready. And He called him son. And He ordered this giant celebration, and the Father threw the biggest party that has ever happened at that place. Yet there's actually a third character to this story, the other brother. The first two stories that Jesus told of lost things, of the lost sheep and the lost coin, it was the shepherd and the sheep. It was the woman and the coin. But in the third one, there was three. It was the Son, the Father, and the brother. And the brother represented the Pharisees. You see, Jesus had been doing all these things. He had been healing the people, and they were upset about it. He was seeing people come to know who He was and accepting Jesus and surrendering their life, not just to His ministry, but following Him and dedicating their lives to sharing about the things that Jesus had done. And the Pharisees saw that if this is the Messiah, if this is the one that is to come, that He is going to change the pocketbooks of what I have. He's going to change the access to, because no longer, when the Messiah comes, no longer is it about bringing the sheep, and no longer is it about sacrifice, but it is about commitment to Jesus and to the Messiah. And that changes things for them. And so that third son was them. And I get it. I get it as the third son. Like, man, that would be hard. Like, Dad, I've been with you for the last few years, been loyal, and I haven't had this kind of a big party. I could see that being harsh. I had 3 kids. I tried to treat them all equally. Try. But there's oftentimes someone say, well, you did that for them. Well, he's older. One day you'll have your opportunity. But I can see it from that brother's perspective, like, man, this isn't fair. And I love sometimes that our grace of our Father is not fair. I remember when I found Jesus when I was young, but I had a friend who came to know Jesus when he was 18. And about 3 months later, he felt so much closer to God than I was. And I was really ridiculous. I was like, Lord, that's kind of unfair. I've known you longer. Like, that's rude. And I had that voice that said, no one's stopping you from following me. No one's stopping you from access to me. It's up to you to pursue. That's what Brandon's been doing, is he's been pursuing me. You've been just stuck in your routine of just wearing the T-shirt. But are you going to follow me? The lost sheep wandered off. The lost coin didn't even know it was lost. The son rejected his father and found himself far away, and from the family name that was disgraced. But the beauty of this story is that Jesus told us that they all went from lost to found. And the Pharisees didn't understand how Jesus could be doing these things. That's why He told the story of the brother. May we never be a people that are ever upset when God does some amazing things in the lives of people. May we celebrate what God does when people go from lost to found. When things get found, let us be those that celebrate. I like to party. I love tacos. I like to get together. My neighbors had a party for a housewarming. They just moved in. And I was like, sick invite, bros. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. I'm not mad about it. But no, it was like this really cool thing. It's like, man, celebrating something new. Let's celebrate it. And that's what these stories do, is celebrate the lost becoming found. Sometimes you just have to listen to his voice, knowing he's looking for you, just like the sheep. And sometimes he finds you even when you didn't even know you were lost or that anyone was looking for you. But he was. And even if you've ran from God, you've tarnished his name, and you've spent your days waiting in the pigs, he has spent his days waiting on you for that day that you came to your senses and returned. And he returned to you as son and daughter, and he is the one that gives you an heir. And today is your day. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the great things you've done in our hearts. Lord Jesus, for those in this room that feel lost, Lord, I pray that you are the one that is guiding them, that you find them, that it does not matter where they've been. It does not matter what they've gone through, Lord Jesus. Whether they're here and they've wandered off because they just found themselves attracted to other things, when they find themselves lost, be the voice that calls them back. And if they're the lost coin, Lord, and they don't even know what's going on, but you're the one that is seeking them, God. We give you praise that you're the one that is going to find them today, God. And for those that have been running, God, if those that may have turned their backs and rejected you, Lord, I just pray that today they come to their senses and they find you in a new way today, God. That you would become their God, that you would be the one that sees them, that you would be the Father that runs towards them and embraces them with all that you have. We give you praise and honor for the great things you're doing as we go from being lost to being found, from going from being in the pigs to being an heir to the throne of God. We give you praise and honor for it in your name. Amen. Amen. Well, I hope today that you will make a decision to be found. That if you need anything, if you feel like, man, I'm struggling with this or I'm dealing with this, we're here to talk to you. Pastor Jordan, myself, Pastor Troy, Pastor Chico, we're here to help you. So feel free to talk to us about anything because we're family and friends. If you're like, hey, I just need prayer for this. I know we have some families that are going, traveling abroad, praying for you, living for you, or going to spend time in prayer for you this week. So, and for those of you going to the rodeo, still jealous. But no, have fun today. Enjoy this week, and may God do amazing things in your journey. Be blessed today as you go.